Welcome back, everyone. Very pleased to announce that this morning we've hit 60,000 subscribers. Amazing, never expected that. Thanks to each and every one of you for that, for following along. It's a lot of fun putting these together. We're trying to make these as interesting as possible to a wide range of people. So even if you're not a designer, the intent is for you to get something out of it that kind of gives you a background and understanding of why cars are designed the way they are. This is the kind of information I would have really relished or would have really enjoyed listening to or getting a sort of a impression of before I started design or as I was going up through the design university. And today I want to bring you a very special critique because I do like this car. I'll tell you right from the beginning, it's up my alley, as we say. I do have a little bit of experience with the company I'll be talking about, so that might give a certain amount of credibility to what I have to say about it. It's the 2020 Ferrari Roma. There's been a lot said about it already. I want to bring in mostly what I feel about the design aspects of it. And like I said, I worked for Ferrari for many years, started in 2002 and designed a few cars for them. There's one, the F430. There's another one, the Ferrari FXX, the Superenza.
F430 is that one.
Oh, fuck. I do have a little bit of experience designing Ferraris. I designed that one, the F430, and that one, the FXX. They've changed, obviously, the design language slightly over the last years, and new generation is a little bit different, but I think the main point is that they all look like Ferraris. So this car that we're going to speak about today, the 2020 Ferrari Roma, what makes it special? Well, first of all, when you look at this car, for me, it stands out as a Ferrari immediately. And I know there's a bit of push and pull on the opinions in terms of what the car looks like, but if you stood back and looked at this car, you'd say it was a Ferrari. You'd say it was quite sculptured, very tight with huge gravitas, and the presence of its proportions is amazing. Basically, it just stands out as a Ferrari. Almost like one single piece of volume. We can call that almost a monolithic type volume. The gentleman who started the vehicle was a gentleman who I have a very good relationship with. We've worked together for many years, Flavio Manzoni, and he's now responsible for Centro Stile Ferrari, which is the design center for Ferrari in Maranello. He's doing an absolutely amazing job. Check out his work throughout his career. You can tell he really knows what he's doing. I think the brief, as we know it, is to create the new sweet life, the new dolce or la nuova dolce vita. And they've done it really well. This is very Italian, the car, pure Italianness. I would even have to say that it's even prettier than the GTC4 Lusso, which is an earlier Ferrari, not too long ago, but this one I think is much more versatile, has a much more wider appeal to it. The simplest forms are, for me obviously, and I think for most designers, are the very hardest forms to develop. I think to design and model a simplistic form in a way that is absolutely balanced is quite difficult from a design point of view. You have to really control the highlights, you have to control the reflections, and that requires a masterful, exquisite almost control to the surfacing. So that's almost a 5-star in itself when you can achieve that. So when I'm talking about pure lines, I'm talking about simplicity and cleanliness of the lines. So you can see there's a minimum of fuss in the general side view of the shape here. And especially in this area here, in the middle part, we're talking about a sensualness, just shapes and reflections, basically determining the look of the side of the profile. And just one nice area right through there that catches a bit of light, adds a little bit of surface entertainment, but that's all it needs. So when we're talking about the simplicity of lines, there's basically only 3 lines on this car. You could say it's this, you could say it's that, and you could say it's that. There, that's the shape. So if we start with the front of the car, and I'm looking at it here on the screen, if we look first of all at that new grille they have on there, the first impression for me is that it has a laser cut look, which means that it's basically different holes that are tapering outwards, slightly becoming smaller as they go outwards and fading outwards. Now, Ferrari has typically done a grille or had grills that are very recognizable, although, you know, albeit different shapes. We call them egg crate type grills, where you basically have a repetition of square holes or relatively square holes. And Ferrari has had this grille for a long time in its history. If you look at this new grille, it's very different, quite different, because first of all, those square holes are much smaller as they move outwards, which is a little bit different from Ferrari's typical design language. But it's quite interesting. It gives it a sort of a depth or a perception of size, because you're not sticking with a 2D surface that just looks flat. That diminification of square holes becoming smaller really gives it sort of a wraparound look, which is important on the car too, because it gives it sort of this almost a very pointed look almost to the front. It's not pointed, but the impression is that it has a lot more curvature to the front of the grille than normal. Now this is important too, because I think that if we look at the front grille, typically your openings are going to be quite large for an engine of this size. It's a V8 putting out over 600 horsepower, and you need to feed that horse a lot of air. Something that we can discover by the fact that the holes are becoming smaller. There must be a requirement that says, or something that says we don't need as much air as possible. Now it's hard for me from a design point of view, looking at the car, to be able to say why the car needs less air. I can imagine it's something mechanical that maybe is running cooler than before, so they require less air coming in, which is a good thing, because openings, holes like that create drag, and we don't like drag as designers. It's creating drag is the last thing you want to do as a designer. You want cars to be very, slipstream, very streamlined, and less holes means you can actually improve the CD, or the coefficient of drag ratio. So hats off to them again, for Ferrari, for being able to do that, closing up holes a little bit more than normal and creating this new look to the grille. What I see on the grille that is a little bit shocking, but I wouldn't say it shocks me in a bad way, it's the fact that they've used a body colored front grille. I've never seen that before in a Ferrari. I like, again, like I said, the actual shape of the Ferrari grille, of this unique Ferrari grille. But again, being body color really pulls it away. You don't notice it as much. Now, is that good or bad? Hard to say. It's that really is subjective. But I'm used to seeing Ferraris having darker grills, and I like the fact that you can really see a Ferrari grille, especially a grille like this one that has that amount of detail and sensitivity to the design. So I probably would have preferred if that grille was actually a little bit darker. Maybe it was say a titanium gray, or anthracite, or even a light black, if that makes any sense. The headlights are a new direction for Ferrari. So typically in the last few generations, they've been very vertically oriented, and this is a new shot at reorienting the direction of the Ferrari headlights. Move along the side of the car, and the first thing that grabs me, especially because the car's just been freshly launched, is that there's an absence of the Ferrari Shield that we typically see on the side of the car. That identifies typically the Ferrari almost in a much more sportier sense. And I can only think that they were, again, being very strict with the reference to the 250 GT Lusso, in the sense that I've never seen one of those cars have that shield on it. So I miss it. I like that reference to Ferrari. It's a reference back to Ferrari and Modena days with yellow background and things. So maybe that's a choice that you can later, if you want, have it added. But what I really like about the doors, very clean sculpted, obviously, and beautiful surface control through there, but are the flush door handles. Flush door handles are not new. They're coming out now in droves. I think a lot of companies are looking at them for aero benefits, but it just cleans up the side of the car quite a bit, and it's done very, very nicely, very gracefully. When I was with McLaren, we did it first on the MP4-12C. That was our first supercar. But the problem with the car there with the door handle was that nobody could really see the door handle or feel it. So you would walk up to McLaren, wonder where the door handle is, slide your hand back and forth. The door wouldn't react, and then you would get really nervous, and everybody on the sidewalk cafes would start to wonder what you're doing as you started moving your hand across, and finally it would just hit the right spot and pop open. But it was a little bit embarrassing not to know exactly where the door handle was. With the Ferrari, you see it, it's tucked away very nicely, but it's still evident that it's the door handle. So I like that. The other thing that really, really impresses me from the proportions is the typical GT fastback style that it has. So that rear volume of the greenhouse, as we call it, just sliding back gently and gracefully to the back end. No steps there. That's just clean, low tail fastback. When we get to the back, the first thing that shocked me when I saw the Roma was the whole new taillight design, very sharply, very crisp design, almost gem-like. It looks like 4 rubies on the back of the car. But it's a huge departure back from what Ferrari did before, has been doing for many, many years, which are those typically round, very simple round taillights, very clean and purposeful. So, I mean, I can understand that perhaps it's done in a way to go away from their typical design language, in the sense that now, if you look at it, it's almost, I can see the combination of design language of the rear taillights with the front taillights. Now, I said that the front taillights were more horizontal, so are the rear taillights. If you look at them, there's a lot of similarity between the two design languages. And perhaps when you look at the taillights from the rear, I haven't been able to do it yet, but if you follow a Ferrari Roma, if you follow a Ferrari Roma from behind, they might look round from behind. It's just that when you look at them from the top 3/4, that they kind of look like a horizontal element instead of that round element. Is that a mistake? Who knows? If you remember the Corvette C7, when they did that, they went from their traditional round headlights that they'd started back in '63. And then in the last generation with the C7, C8, now they've gone with something very Camaro-like, and they got hammered, actually got slammed from the typical or from their loyal clientele. So whether or not that's going to be accepted or not, that's to be seen, but it is a departure, as I said. Now, what I do like about the rear, especially is the actual rear glass, how it kind of blends into what we call an active rear spoiler. And if you follow the cut line on the back, obviously the glass doesn't open up, but what happens is the hatch part just behind the glass is what swings upwards. And that is absolutely beautiful and very well designed, because if you follow the cut line, it goes very low. It even takes up the registration or the license plate with it. It's fantastic, because the reason for that means that you don't have to lift your baggage, which in a GT car you will have. If you're cross-country or crossing continents or whatever, you will need to take some luggage with you. So the lower you have to lift the luggage, the easier it's going to be, obviously. So I think it's a point now to bring up this criticism that I've read quite a bit on the actual look of the car, that it looks very much like an Aston Martin or even like a Jaguar. I don't agree with that at all. I think it's much more reminiscent of the classic Ferrari GT cars. You know, they had their roots in the 50s and the 60s, so these cars came before what you see today by Aston Martin and Jaguar. So again, that's just a comment by people who don't know too much about the history of Ferrari. And then moving on to the interior, the biggest change I would say on the car is obviously the fact that now they've gone from being what we always knew Ferrari as, is analog, and it's gone extremely digital now on the interior. So you have 3 display screens, very few buttons on the inside, so everything is basically just touch capacitive buttons that you get a response from by light, actually. And so it's lost that appeal that Ferraris, I think, should have, that analog appeal. The one thing that has been maintained or kept is the one thing I really do love about Ferraris, is that what we call the Manettino. So that's the button, the red button on the steering wheel, that allows you to give a setting to either the performance and the handling, or a combination of all those. But that button, again, is analog, and it's the most beautiful analog button, one of them, that I've ever seen. I designed the first one, proud to say that, on the Ferrari F430. It came out, and I was sent over to the Formula One department across the street from Maranello, from my office, to the race department to pick up what they used, the same, what we call the Manettino, what they used on the steering wheels of the Ferrari Formula One cars. And one of the craziest experiences I've ever had. I went over there to see if I could get one to bring back to the design studio to use as a reference. And the Ferrari race team refused to give it to me, or at least they put up a hard fight. I went over, and first of all, they asked me who I was. I said, well, I work across the street. I run the design department. I'd like the Manettino that you guys have on the steering wheel, just to have it for a couple hours to look at and see if I can use it for some inspiration. And they told me to go take a hike, that you can't just come over here and take a part from the racing department. You You have to sign up and come later and pick it up, and you'd be restricted on time as to how long you could have it and to bring it back. Probably cost more than the car itself anyways that we were designing, but at any rate, I did pick it up. I did have it for a few hours and was able to use it as inspiration for the new Monetinos that started coming out on the F430 and thereon afterwards. So at least that has been still kept on the Ferrari Roma. But what I really do miss on that steering wheel is that red starter button that all Ferraris had. It's classic Ferrari. You want to be able to push a red button and watch the engine fire to life. So that's gone. Okay. The Ferrari Roma has to be what I would call one of the most today at least, one of the most lust-worthy classic Italian beauties. It talks Italian design. It's got that awesome melodic accent that all Ferrari engines have, and Italian people. And like many Italian people, men, women, it looks like it's dressed to kill at 9 a.m. So I've always wondered what a beautiful horse would look like if it was wearing stilettos or high heels, and I would have to say that the Roma is it. I know I said in my last analysis video that I would never give a car a 10, and the Ferrari Roma is not going to change that. I think I would only give a car a 10 if there was absolutely nothing on the car that I would change. And on the Roma, personally, I would like to see a dark grille, something that looks like an air intake on the front. I would like to see the shield on the side. I know that is very small, but designers, details, you know that story. And then on the side, again, I think the highest point on the rear haunch is directly above the rear wheel. Now I know I've always said that that could be the ideal position on the front wheel arch or fender. But on the rear, I think sometimes it helps to give it a little bit more bias towards the front of the center of the rear wheel, just to give it that little extra push. This car is, you know, leaping. It's got that dynamic push forward. So if you had that high point slightly more forward, not much, about that much, maybe even less, but what that would do is give a bit more of a forward lean to the haunch, a bit more power in the rear wheels, a bit more of a dynamic look. So sometimes if you can just hint at that center point of the haunch being slightly more forward, it's a little bit more dynamic. So that's just a very slight proportional change there. I want a simple round rear Ferrari taillight if I had one. I'll give it a solid 9.5. So there you have it, my analysis of the 2020 Ferrari Roma. Awesome, amazing, beautiful car. And again, thank you very, very much for making my morning very special. I woke up to 60,000 subscribers. To all of you who are subscribers already, thank you so much for following this. And again, to all of you who are joining me for the first time, stay with us for the ride. It's going to be fun. We got a lot of more interesting cars to talk about. So let me know what you think about it. Let me know if the car is meh, if it's wow, if it feels like a Ferrari to you. Would you spend some extra hard-earned cash on this car? If you're a kid again, would you put it up on your bedroom wall? You know, if so, put it down below. Let me know what you think, and I look forward to reading those comments. And again, thank you very much for following this, and look forward to seeing you in the next video.